One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. We are here today to talk about the truth about video podcasting and what you should do before you start a video podcast. Now, I realize you may be watching this or listening to this and you already have a video podcast, or you're maybe even months or years into your podcasting journey, but that's okay, because the things I'm going to share with you today can be helpful no matter the stage you find yourself in today. All right, so some of the top things that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about the different types of formatting when it comes to recording your video podcast. We're going to break down some of my favorite equipment recommendations. Plus, we are going to dive into some of the great examples of, should you have everything on one channel if you're doing YouTube or your audio only podcast? Like, we're going to break all of these down. But I think one of the really fun things that we're going to get into is some of my favorite resources and examples that I cannot wait to share with you today. So let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? Hello and welcome back to the podcast. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, so happy to see you. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm so excited. I am Crystal Profit. I am a content therapist. I'm also a podcast coach and content strategist. And basically, I'm trying to help you have a healthy relationship with your content. And today, I'm so excited to talk about video podcast. Now, we're going to get into some murky waters here, because there's going to be some purists out there that say a podcast is audio only. They don't live in the video space. They don't live on YouTube. They don't live anywhere else other than on my podcast app on my phone. But I have to disagree. Okay. And I used to think this way too. Like I was a purist and I was like, no. It has to be just, audio only listening to it. But now I don't believe that at all. I think that you should put your content on any and all platform where you can reach your ideal audience. And YouTube and video podcast have really helped in discoverability and helping you get your message out there. But this question isn't just a random topic that I decided to talk about today. This was actually a fan mail question that came in through the audio only version. So if you are listening on, wherever your favorite podcast app, there's going to be a place where you can click send Crystal a text message. So if you want to ask me a question or be featured on the podcast, I highly encourage you to do that. But I'm actually going to share, we're going to look at today's question because it's going to be super fun to read this specific question out. Okay. Are you ready? Because I am going to go in to fan mail. So this is through my Buzzsprout app. And I'm going to give Joe from Arkansas a shout out. So Joe, thank you so much. You've written in multiple times, and this is just such a fantastic question. So he says, "Hey KP, it's Joe again from Arkansas. With your latest episode with Justin, you talked about watching the video version on YouTube. How do you handle video podcast? At the moment, I just have Buzzsprout send my episodes to YouTube. However, you aren't able to change that file to a video. Do you handle the podcast separately for YouTube so you can upload the video?" And then it's so funny, Joe, I love that you came back and you said, "Hey, it's Joe again from Arkansas. Just sent you a message, but then read your description about leaving my name in my podcast. So my name is Joe. The podcast is Unsolved Histories, new and growing podcast about unsolved mysteries in history." So Joe, thank you so much. This was just a fantastic question. And I'm so excited that you asked it because I think it's one of those things that many people have this question and they want to know, how does this work? Like, what's the difference between video podcast, audio only podcast, and, kind of the spiel that we went into earlier, but I'm actually going to go a lot deeper. And I have many aspects, having done this since 2018, when I first started my podcasting journey, it looks different, right? I used to y'all, let's go back here in time for a second. Let's time travel to, let me see, it would have been April-ish of 2018 when I recorded my very first interview. It was on Skype. I mean, it feels like the dial-up internet of 2018 because it was on Skype. It was not these fancy recording platforms that we have today it was harsh and I didn't do great the first few interviews, but you know what? Here we are. We fast forwarded several years later and I do have a podcast that is on YouTube as well as wherever you get your podcast and listen to it. So people have options now, right? And it really just comes down to your audience's preference. And I do believe that there is a time and a place to have audio only. And I do think there's a time and a place to have video. So we're going to break this down and get into it. But one of the first things that we have to talk about is the format. Okay. So this is segment number one, topic number one, however you want to categorize this. It's what is the format of your video podcast? Now, there's two real ways I want you to, let's call them lenses, right? Two different lenses I want you to look at your podcast through. And that is, are you doing a solo only episode or interviews? And are you doing in-person or virtual? So those are the two different lenses of, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be only this way or only that way. It's just how I'm really going to, you're going to categorize immediately. You're going to know, oh, I do this, or I do both of those, or I only do one of these, or I have an aspiration to do all of the above. But this is where the complication lies, is when somebody wants to have a certain type of podcast, but they're limited either by their geographic location of all of their other guests or by the fact that you just want to have a solo episodes, when you put out your content, but you're setting everything up like it's going to be an interview. So let's just start there, right? So solo versus interview, which ones should you have for your video podcast? So for me, I do both. I do both. I do solo episodes, like what you're watching today, what you're listening today is a solo episode. It's just me, of course. Like my awesome videographer, like video editor is going to be putting in some really great clips from previous content or other episodes that we've done, but it is just me today. Like I planned today's episode, I'm creating this content solo, and yes, I'm sharing other resources, but it's not something that has to do with anybody else's schedule. Like I put this, scheduled the recording time that we're using here today on my own calendar, not on anyone else's calendar. So if you're asking like, well, what should I do? What works best? There's no right or wrong. I always tell people like, it's your content. Like you make the rules, do, whatever you choose to do in your content, but do what works best for you. So you could have a solo video podcast, or you could have an interview style video podcast. And again, the video piece is a little bit more complex whenever it's more people because scheduling becomes an issue, right? It's not, people want to say like, oh, they didn't have a microphone, they didn't have the right speakers, but let's back up because the first issue you run into when you start doing interviews is timing. Like,
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Can you get on the same page? Can you even get in the same time zone? Y'all, I've interviewed so many people from around the globe, and sometimes it's 10 p.m. for that person. Like I've interviewed someone in Romania, and then other times it's 6 a.m. for me whenever I'm doing an interview in Australia, right? So it just depends on what type of audience, what type of people, like who's in your network and how are you making things work. But scheduling is the first piece that can come in as a complication with interviewing, but you can have such better reach, such richer conversations and deeper insights, and you can really expose your audience to more topics than you alone as an expert in what you're talking about. You are limited, right? You don't know everything about everything, or you shouldn't, right? You should always be learning. So this is why I choose to have a solo episodes and interviews on my podcast, because it really brings a much richer experience for my audience. And that is who I'm ultimately trying to serve and really give them a great value. So that's my spiel for solo versus interview. I think that both are warranted, both are really needed for your video podcast, but it's just up for you to decide which one's going to work best. Now let's move into the other camp of should you do in-person or virtual? Now, I'm going to be really honest. 99.9% of episodes that have been produced are virtual. Okay. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't have the setup for someone to come to my house and come over to the studio and let's record, or let's go, downtown to my fancy layout studio. No. That's not how it typically works around here. I do so much over Riverside, over Zoom, all these different platforms where you can record, because that's what works best for me and for the guests that are coming onto my show. So I want to throw that out there. However, I have had so many incredible opportunities to record in person. And when you can, those are some really special interviews. So if you watch the channel, regularly, you'll watch my episode with Justin Moore. We recorded this in ConvertKit, which is soon going to be Kit, they're rebranding. They're brand new podcast studios in downtown Boise, Idaho. And if you haven't watched that, make sure you go check out their studio space. But it was incredible. Like the energy that you get being in person with someone else, it's so much fun. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. And I want to do more of those. Maybe I will have a studio one day where people can, come over to my house and we can record and, go to dinner afterwards or something. But oh my gosh, the energy is so fun. So you have to make that decision. If you're doing video podcast, what's your setup going to be like? If you're doing it in person, it could just be your mobile phone and a portable recorder, or you're going to be recording with your Rode like USB microphones, like whatever it looks like for you. I cannot encourage you enough to just keep it simple. You don't have to have, who knows how expensive the kit studios are. Like they're really fancy. Okay. They are very, very fancy, like far fancier than anything I'm probably ever going to have. But it was so nice to be able to just walk in there and hit record. And, we have this beautiful camera content with this beautiful audio content, but I know in reality, what it's probably going to look like for a lot of people is setting up a phone, setting up some portable mics, and just making it work with your audience. And it can be a really cool dynamic to make that happen in person. So those are kind of the formats for setting up your video podcast. Now, I want to move into your equipment options. Now, okay, so I don't usually do this, but I am actually going to go through a part of a PDF that's inside my program, Profit Podcasting. So if you haven't heard this before, this is my digital course that teaches you all about how to start, launch, and market a podcast in 30 days or less. You can go to crystalprofit.com/course to check it out. But this PDF guide is actually something that can help you go through the simplicities of the type of setup that you want. Now, it doesn't go into like the whole in-person solo or interview because you would have already made those decisions by the time you got to this point in the program. But the two things that I really harp on in this PDF document is about being flexible and mobile, or fixed and fancy. These are really like the two personality traits that you can decide, and you know which one you are, okay? Like if you want to be able to take your camera and your mic and go record something in your pantry, or while you're folding laundry, or while you're going on a walk with your dog or whatever, like that's the flexible and mobile aspect of recording your podcast. Or you could be the fixed and fancy, which is me. Okay. This is where I find myself, today as I'm recording this, I'm in the fixed and fancy mode, which means I have a pretty permanent setup. I'm not, taking a laptop and, going to work somewhere else in my house and record things. Like I'm in what I would call my office, but you could also call it my studio. Like I have my ring light set up. I have my camera on my desk. I have my boom arm for my microphone, and I have my really fancy, gaming computer. So, and as you can see, if you're just listening on the audio version, I'll read some of these off to you. But for the flexible and mobile approach, you have your laptop, a USB microphone, and maybe a mobile phone or a tablet for recording your video. But then the fixed and fancy is some of the things I just listed: your gaming computer, an audio interface. This is what I have for plugging in my XLR cables for this particular microphone. I have a dynamic microphone. I have my shock mount, which is attached to my boom arm. And then I have my boom arm, right? So, but with both experiences, and this is what it says, you have a recording space with limited background noise. Bonus if you can find a space with a door for privacy and fewer distractions. Y'all, I can't even tell you how many times I recorded my podcast in my closet when I had a flexible mobile setup. I had a laptop, I had a USB microphone, and I would go take it into my closet because the noise was deadened. Like it wasn't super loud in my closet. So that's what I used for a long time before I had a more permanent setup in my office. So it's not to say that you can only have one option and not upgrade later, but start with where you are with your budget and then work up from there. Another thing that I listed as an optional thing is a pop filter. So this microphone actually comes with, it has a built-in pop filter, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It's like the screen that you put on top of your microphone that catches your plosives, which I didn't even know that's what that was, that fancy word is the plosives, because it actually has one. The P is a plosive and I'm turning my face away from my mic because it will be loud. Like I can actually see those in the waveform when I start saying like the Profit Podcast. Those are two plosives for my show, but whenever you have a pop filter, it makes them less harsh for your listeners. So if you do have just a basic microphone, you might want to consider getting a pop filter, getting some sort of, contraption that can catch a lot of those plosives before they go directly into your mic. So good little reminder here. And then headphones whenever you're recording interviews. Personally, and I wrote this in here, personally, I don't wear headphones when I record solo episodes, and I stick to that. Like here we are. I'm actually recording. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't wear headphones when I'm recording this. I don't. It's so distracting. I know some people like to have like headphones and like hear themselves in the monitors. I don't. It's so distracting and it really throws me off to hear myself. I know that I'm loud enough, know that it's going to sound fine because I never have an issue with being like too soft-spoken. I always have an issue with being too loud, which is okay. Like we can temper that down later. But one other thing that I want to go over, because I know you're going to ask is like, well, what do you recommend for microphones and what does that look like? So for USB microphones, I actually have it. If you're watching on the video, oh, it's over here. You actually can't see it today. Hang on. I'm going to have to swing my video around. I always have my microphone. It's up here. It's my very first $20 microphone that I got. It's literally a plug and play. There's no settings. You can't do anything to that microphone except plug it into a computer and make it like adjust it, which angle you want the mic to come at your face. But it was $20 on Amazon in 2018 whenever I bought it. So it's one of those like prized possessions. I'll never get rid of it. But it was $20. Like it's what I had the budget for. It's what I could start with. Then I upgraded to, I had a Blue Yeti for a long time. And then one that I always recommend is a Samsung Q2U or ATR 2100X. Like this is another one that you can try out. I personally haven't used those last two myself, but it's ones that I've heard recommended time and time again. But then there's the wires or wired microphones. So a Rode Procaster, this is what I actually have today. So it's the mic that I have. A Rode Pod mic is a little bit cheaper and they have USB versions of that. So USB or XLR, you can absolutely check those out. And then I just buy the Amazon Basics cables. I know people will have all their opinions about like, you should buy a really fancy cable and do all this. I'm an Amazon Basics girl. I'm basic. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm a basics girl. It's where I am. But when it comes to interfaces, so what is an interface? What does this look like? This is where you would plug those cables. Cause obviously like, I mean, if you're watching the video, you can see like this has a cable and on the end of it, it's not a USB. Like it looks like it needs to be plugged into an amp or something. Well, you can't plug that directly into your computer. You have to plug it into an interface. And then that interface has a USB. That is what I use for my setup here. And I actually have a Scarlett 2i2, but there's one, you can plug in two microphones. So if I wanted to record here in person, I could have two microphones plugged in because Lord knows I have extra microphones laying around this office. We won't get into that. We won't. I actually have other videos that I'll link to where I've gone through. It's kind of like my grab bag of microphones that I have in here. But for most people, you're just going to need a Scarlett Solo, which is just one. You just need to be able to plug in one microphone and then you're good to go. You can adjust, the settings and do all the things there. But another one is the Rodecaster Pro. So it has so many different settings. I actually have a version 2, and I know that they actually have different colors too now. So we'll have to link to those and show those here on the screen because those are really cool. And I think that they're super fancy. I personally don't have one. I want one. Rode, if you want to send me one, like I will not reject it. I will share it loud and proud. It's just not something that I've invested in because it's just, I'm set in my ways and this is a setup that I've had. It's worked for me, but Rode, if you want to send me one, I will happily accept it. Pop filters. We already talked about those. The Dragon Pad microphone pop filter is the one that I had forever. I still have it over here. The Chaotica Eyeball. Okay. There's a lot of opinions on this in my friend group where I've had, oh my gosh, that's so ingenious. Why didn't I think of that? To that is the most ridiculous thing that I've ever seen. Why did you buy this thing? So, and I'll have to link to a picture of it because I used to use it in a lot of my videos, but basically it's this big round eyeball and my Blue Yeti microphone went inside of it. So have you ever seen those like sound boxes? Like that's essentially what it is. It's just round and rappers use them. They're a Canadian company and I've actually ordered 2 or 3 of them and they're awesome. I think they're super cool. They just didn't work for the aesthetic of my videos. And so I switched to, that's when I got my Rode Procaster. And it's the one that I absolutely love and the one I've been using for a while. But, to each their own, like you can do all sorts of fun stuff. But that's kind of like an overview of, the different types of equipment that you can use. I mean, we could go into 1,000 other things, but it's what I recommend to my students. Like I said, you saw this is straight from my program, Profit Podcasting. Again, if you want to go check it out, go to crystalprofit.com/course and you can learn more about this program. But I want to go into where do you upload video podcasts, right? Because Joe is, he back to his original question is like, you said something about watching this on YouTube. What does that look like? And how does that look like for you? So here's the thing. You cannot, as of like me recording this right now, you cannot upload your video. So if, when I'm done here, I can export this as, MP4, but I can't upload that into Buzzsprout, right? And to my knowledge, that's not something that's on their roadmap to make that a thing because they're audio first. Like that's what their mission is. So I don't even have that in my mind of like, oh, one day Buzzsprout will have this. Like, no, I just have my Buzzsprout audio only. That's where I'm putting out my show. Then I have YouTube. They are 2 separate things in my mind. And Buzzsprout actually has a great video for, talking about how video podcasts work. And we'll have that linked in the show notes because I want you to go check out. Like I have tons of resources for you, but that's one of them is like how to upload a podcast to YouTube. And they give you the full step-by-step because it's not going to be helpful for me to go through that here right now. But I do want you to go check that out if you want to know more about it. But you can't upload your video podcast to Buzzsprout natively. Now, YouTube, this is one that I have lots of opinions about. I do think that your podcast should be on YouTube. How it's uploaded is up to you, right? Because for a long time, it was really difficult to do audio and then try to go back and record your video and do this, but then you recorded your video and you're like, it's not that great. It's on Zoom. It's not, fantastic. I'm just going to strip the audio and then maybe one day I'll upload it to YouTube. YouTube is a search engine. That's what it comes down to. Like it is a search engine that can help your content be discovered by more people. So I believe that your content should also live on YouTube. If you're already recording video and you're already comfortable, sitting here and recording something for your content, do some video and put it up on YouTube. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't even have to be edited. It could be a Zoom recording of you just recording exactly what you're saying, no fancy edits, and you put it up on YouTube. You're going to have a higher chance of someone finding it than just hoping and praying, crossing your fingers and crossing your toes that someone's going to type in the exact title of your podcast, of your episode description, of the title that you did for your recent episode. It's not going to be as likely for someone to find you on a podcast platform than it would be on YouTube. So there's my preaching to everybody that you need to have your podcast on YouTube, but you should. It should be a priority for you. Now, the RSS feed feature that's on YouTube, which Joe mentioned, this has not worked for my podcast. And I don't know why. I've heard other people have success with this where they can, upload a podcast. I don't know if it's because I have so many episodes. I've actually reached out to the YouTube team and they are working on a feature, hopefully in the future, where it will be a lot more seamless. I don't know. I haven't heard an update about it, but this has now not worked for my show from the beginning of trying this feature. So I don't know, TBD on why my podcast wasn't working great. Maybe because I have the word podcast in my name. Who knows? Who knows the real story behind it? But this feature hasn't worked for me. But there is a video that I'm going to link to show you how to do it. Because if you are a Buzzsprout user, that's who I use, it's who I recommend, and you can go into the directories part and you can highlight where you want to be featured in YouTube. it's not going to show you how you can connect it that way, but it is going to show you how you can go in and you have to add your email to your RSS feed for like 48 hours. And then you upload that into YouTube. Again, I'm going to link to this because there's already a fantastic video and blog post written about this from Buzzsprout that I want you to go check out, but it hasn't worked for me. So I just want to be like transparent and honest. I don't use this feature because it's never worked for me and it doesn't really work for the way my YouTube channel is set up. Okay, next point I wanted to make is with YouTube, you're able to share shorts and clips of your show, which clips of your show are essentially YouTube shorts, right? Like whatever you would share on social, you can share on YouTube shorts as long as it's like 60 seconds or under. Maybe it's like 59 seconds, but I do know that it has to be a little bit shorter. Like Instagram used to be, you can make reels up to 90 seconds. Well, you can't use those 90-second reels on YouTube shorts. They have to be a little bit shorter. So I find that people are discovering my channel this way by putting out clips of my podcast. So it's just another platform for you to reach a new audience or reach more people. So it's another reason to consider it. Now, Apple Podcasts, you can go in and natively upload your video podcast into Apple. You can also do the same thing for Spotify for podcasters. So we're going to link to those. This is not something that I do, and it's not something I specialize in. So I'm not going to say, you should absolutely do this. This works incredible. But I am going to link to the resources because I know if you're interested, if you already have an audience on Spotify, you already have audience on Apple Podcasts, and you're like, I want to grow this, maybe adding that video component, like test it out and see, like, why not, right? Like, I think it's something you can experiment with. But for me personally, I choose to do my uploading of my video podcast to YouTube. It's where I already have a presence and I already have people that, show up there on YouTube. So it's what I do. Now, last point, all right? Last thing we need to talk about. Should you have a separate channel for an ongoing podcast versus other types of videos you post on YouTube? This is one of those questions that I get asked a lot too when it comes to video podcasts. Is like, should you have like the Profit Podcast or just Crystal Profit? And I want to tell you my personal experience with this, but I also have some other examples that are from a few different industries. That way you can decide which approach works for you, because my answer is it depends. It depends, because I like to keep it simple and I host everything on one channel. Okay. So I have the Crystal Profit channel and it has the Profit Podcast. It also has other sponsored content that I upload. It has other tutorial videos that I'll do. It has other interviews that may not be on the Profit Podcast. So I upload everything to one space because I don't want to manage multiple channels. But I do know other people that they don't keep everything under one umbrella. And Pat Flynn, he's a great example. So Pat Flynn, shout out to Pat. He's been around for a long time. He's actually who I learned podcasting from back in the day. And he has gone on to create multiple YouTube channels. He doesn't just have everything under his name, Pat Flynn. But he has Smart Passive Income. He has Deep Pocket Monsters, which is a channel that he co-created, I believe, with his son, which is all about Pokemon and their experiences with the Pokemon community, which is actually bigger than the Pat Flynn Smart Passive Income brand, which is so fun, right? But they're separate. He didn't say, oh, I have a fascination with Pokemon and I want to do this thing with my son. Let's do it all under my existing brand. He went and created another brand. So he doesn't have everything all in one place. So I want you to go check this out. Go look at other creators that you know that may have multiple channels and see how they've done this. Another example is Ramsey Solutions. So shout out my friends over at Ramsey Solutions. They have so many different shows and platforms, and they are not all on one YouTube channel, right? You have the bigger Ramsey Solutions, which is the Dave Ramsey show, the Ramsey show. It's been around for a long time. They do live streams multiple times a week, and that is one avenue. But the live streams live mostly on one channel. And then they'll take clips of it. Then they have Entree Leadership. They have George Camel Show. They have Rachel Cruz. They have John Deloney. They have all of these different platforms. They have Smart Money Happy Hour, which I'm going to give a plug for that podcast. I think it's so funny and it's so the pop culture references in that show are just so much fun. But again, they're all under this one umbrella, but they each have different individual channels. So this is just going to depend on you and your brand. Do you want to manage multiple channels? Do you want to have a podcast and then a personal brand, or a podcast and a business brand? This is going to be up to you. I can't make that decision. You're going to be the one. Maybe you, if you're just a solopreneur, I would recommend doing it all under one brand name. And if you have a team of people and you can have the capacity to manage multiple things like logistically, then maybe it's worth doing one for your brand or your business and then one for your podcast and just content creation. So that's my plug for, again, it's your content. You make the rules and you can do whatever the heck that you want. But I think that whatever you choose to do, it should be something that feels aligned with who you are, how you want to create content, and if you're going to have fun with what you're creating. Oh my gosh. So much, like deep breath. We got through it. Lots of questions about video podcasts. Again, Joe from Arkansas, thank you so much. Hang on, let me go back and give you another shout out. So he has the Unsolved Histories, and I think that it's really fun to answer these questions. So thank you again, Joe, for your fan mail shout out today. If you have a question that you want featured on the podcast, make sure you go to the audio only version, right? So this is the difference between having the video version and the audio version. Only on the audio version will you have the text message option to send Crystal a text message. Send me a text. I want to hear from you. But if you are watching on the YouTube channel, put in the comments. What is your question? What else do you want to know about? Do you want to know something else about video podcast? Or do you want to know another aspect about content creation or monetizing your content, getting started with your content? I want to hear from you, so comment below. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video if you found it helpful. Subscribe so you don't miss other updates that we are going to have every single week about content strategy, content creation, and keeping going with your content. But as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.